Hello everyone. Welcome to the live broadcast today. Thank you so much for joining us in another live broadcast with Project Control Academy. We are very glad to have you joining us today. Today we are going to embark on a really interesting topic, which might be also new to many of us, on collaborative contracting and how it can transform your project delivery. So talking about project delivery, as you know, lack of collaboration, coordination, miscommunication, misaligned interest among the stakeholders are some of the top reasons why many capital projects fail. Now, imagine a world where an owner and contractor are actively collaborating and working together in a project right from the contract all the way through the project lifecycle. Instead of focusing on your individual interest, which sometimes may lead to claims, disputes, or lack of trust. And now imagine embracing a culture of collaboration and shared responsibilities between the owner and contractor so that both of you come to a mutually beneficial outcome in the project. And that's exactly where collaborative contracting come into play. But how does it work? How does it differ from the traditional contracting models that perhaps you know? What benefits can be obtained from collaborative contracting? How about some challenges with the implementation or with adoption of collaborative contracting? These are some of the topics that we are going to discuss today. I hope you are all excited to learn about collaborative contracting. Now, before we dive into the session and I introduce our fantastic guest speaker for today's discussion, if you haven't done so already, please go in the chat, introduce yourself, tell us who you are, from which country you're tuning in, and why you joined the session. So have the introduction coming, and please make this session as engaging as possible. Every 2 weeks, we go live on LinkedIn and our social media platform. We have a fantastic expert on a topic that shed more light on some of the challenges, some of the new things like today, or something that you would benefit from. And if you are engaged in the conversation, you can really get the most out of the session. I also would like to ask everyone who are here to also, if you don't mind, do me a favor and click on repost or reshare so that others in your connections, in your network also know about this great session that we have and can join the conversation and benefit from this value pack session. So just go ahead, click on repost and invite your connections to join this great session as well. Now, about me, I am 𝐂𝐫𝐸 Qurbani, the founder and technical director of Project Control Academy, which is the leading global provider of comprehensive and online training programs in project controls. And today, it's truly my honor to introduce our fantastic guests who bring profound insight and experience into the topic of collaborative contracting, this new approach that many of us has not yet tapped into. He is currently serving as the Vice President of Project Controls at AtkinsRéalis, formerly known as SNC Lavalin, and has been one of the early adopters of collaborative contracting in North America. So it's truly an honor to have Hagire Emrani joining us today. Please help me give a big warm welcome to Hagire to join us in this virtual platform. So Hagire, welcome to this session. We are very glad to have you joining us today and shedding more light on collaborative contracting. Thank you so much for joining us, Hagire.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. To get started, I very, very briefly introduce you. Hagire, can you start the conversation by walking us through your journey in project controls and how did you get to know about collaborative contracting? Just walk us through a little bit about yourself and your career path to this day.
Yes, thank you, sure. I'm a civil engineer by education. I've been working in the construction sector for a long time. Started with a little bit of estimation and planning and some cost control, and eventually got into more project controls away from site activities, and have been working in different sectors: oil and gas, offshore, onshore, some institutional works with municipalities and transit sector and industrial sector and mining sector, to name a few. So I've worked in many different sectors in different capacities, and what we've been seeing in the past couple of years is that this trend that many of the clients, many of the sectors are adopting more and more the collaborative approach as it better responds to the challenges that they have in these large projects or small, medium-sized projects that they're dealing with, and are not necessarily functioning in the traditional with the traditional delivery methods.
Perfect. Thank you, Hajir, for shedding more light on that. So now, before we get started, if you don't mind, I want to greet some of our audience who are joining us live here, and then we go dive into collaborative contracting. I see Marcel joining us from Netherlands. Very glad to see Marcel here joining us. We have Fabo joining us from London. Welcome, Fabio. We also have Bhumi joining us here from India. Thanks for joining us. We also have Afsal joining us from Saudi Arabia. We have someone joining us from Dallas, Texas. Very glad to have you here, everyone. And yeah, so thank you. We have people from United Kingdom, from United Arab Emirates, from Kenya joining us. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate you. Andres joining us from Germany. We have from Istanbul, Abdullah. Good to see you here. So thank you, everyone. Again, if you haven't introduced yourself, please go ahead and introduce in the chat and let us know if you have been involved in collaborative contracting before. Is it a new concept to you? Share also your experience or knowledge on this topic before we get started on it. Now, going back to the topic, Hajir, thank you for the introduction and let us know what collaborative contracting is because I'm sure it's new to many of us and we might not have been exposed to that. So, what is really collaborative contracting, Hajir?
Yeah, we could say that collaborative contracting is essentially normal contracting on the steroids, if you want. The collaborative contracting model, essentially all it does is that it goes about better alignment of the benefits and objectives of what all the stakeholders are trying to achieve from a project, instead of every stakeholder going after their own needs and really approaching any project from trying to deliver to deliver the project from their own point of view, whether this is the community in which this is being built, whether it's the client, it's the third parties, the contractor, designer, so on and so forth. It tries to bring everybody together to introduce some incentives and KRAs that would align everybody's objectives and help deliver the project better. The other important thing that it does is that it has a lot of benefits in terms of redistributing the risk to make sure the party that is best suited that risk would be able to take that and not just be obliged to take it as because of what is written in a certain contract. So these are the two main attributes of collaborative contracting. Now, if you share your screen for 1 sec, we can have a quick look at this slide. This is one of the types of the collaborative contracting. This is the alliance contracting model. As you can see here, if I talk about the right side for 1 second from a cost and profit point of view, this model ensures that all the costs, which is at the bottom part of the screen here, all the costs of the work is going to be paid and it provides a situation in which the contractor is always going to recoup their bare cost. Um, then it starts to define other additional elements on top of that, and you will go in with a profit which is reasonable comparable to the market, and then there's an opportunity here to gain additional profit if those, as I was discussing before, aligned objectives are attained and the community is happy, the client is happy, third parties are happy, everybody is getting some of those benefits that are supposed to be getting from any given project. So it creates a mechanism by which you would have a normal project, a normal method of delivering the project, but also there's an opportunity to get additional benefits out of that for all the stakeholders. If you have a look here on the left side, you can see that in a typical alliance contracting, what you have here is that you have the contractor, owner, and consultant all working together. There is this thing called AMT, which is essentially equivalent to the management team of that project, which would be comprising of all these people on this project. And they would be managing the project and making the decisions together. They will be looking at the designs. They will be looking at all the important decisions that have to be made in the life cycle of a project and run that. Then you have this thing called Alliance, the leadership team at the top. There are different acronyms for that. In this case, we're calling this Alliance leadership, as it is called up in Canada. And this is the team which is essentially equivalent to the sponsors team, and also represented by different people whose job is to ensure that the project stays within the direction that it needs to go and it delivers what it needs to deliver. And on the left side, then you have these four essentially boxes, which are coaches, if you want. One of them, obviously, making sure that the audit is placed, because this is a very transparent process. Everything is open books. You have a financial advisor, which would essentially helps the project deliver, the advice that they would need to in order to be maximizing the benefits from a financial point of view. You have an alliance advisor, which essentially their job is to make sure everybody works together and there is no owner contractor relationship, and everybody learns how to play. And then there is this thing which is called fairness advisor, which would again ensure that if something is not being dealt with, and you have you would need to go and talk to somebody as an independent person to ensure that something is resolved, then they would just go to the fairness advisor. And that's essentially a process where you would have a leadership team, the project team, plus all kinds of coaches to ensure that something is being delivered, the project is being delivered.
That's amazing. May I ask some questions, Hagire, on the right side? So, in every contract, the contractor looking to gain some profit, right? So, when we have this shared and collaborative environment, is that also an open book? You said everything is open book, even the profit that the contractor is gaining is an open book here too. Everyone
Yes.
knows that.
Yes. So the typical way that these contracts work is that you would several teams would come in and bid for the job, and throughout that process, you don't necessarily talk about the final cost of the job. You would only talk about, you essentially present your team. These are the people that are supposed to be on the team. There is this thing called behavioral assessment, collaborative behavioral assessment, or CBA, for which you're being interviewed. All the stakeholders are being interviewed in real scenarios to make sure that, yes, you're able to work together. Nobody is an alpha female or alpha male, and that's going to dictate the way to the rest of the people. And that's essentially, and then you've got a technical proposal of either how we understand the project, and a commercial proposal, how we understand the contract. And these are the three that would essentially enable the client to choose a chosen a JV or a contractor to do this job, or an entity to do this job. Once those are happening, once those are done, then the development works starts, and this is also in a way tieable to AEC best practices, because typically what you would have is that you would have a gate 3, a FL3, it's like kind of basic design done, and which would give you a preliminary idea at the beginning, and that's the type of information that is shared with the team. Okay, when they are bidding for the job, then they would come in and they would essentially continue the design and bring it to some kind of a class 2 estimate, and that's at that time where you will have, between the class 3 and the class 2 estimate, you would have developed a schedule, execution schedule, a cost, a estimate, base of schedule, all the good stuff that have to come with it. All of these are essentially being determined at that time. You would have put in a contingency, a profit percentage, which is going to be negotiated, and some KRAs, which would determine that. So all of these boxes, all of these cylinders on top of each other, are essentially going to be determined based on the guidelines of the contract within post-award. It's not like you go with your closed eyes and just put some numbers in there, and then you have to add for all kinds of risks and uncertainties. And that's really the beauty of this model, in which you are actually talking to each other and determining, oh, what's the best place to go? What am I going to take as contingency and profit? What's the level of risk that I want to accept as a client or as an alliance partner?
So even in the development stage, Hagire, like when we are coming up with the cost estimate, like it's collaborative effort between the owner and contractor. Is that how it works? If
Yes.
it's starting from the contract, from which stage of the project this alignment starts?
Yeah. So if I give you an example of a recent contract that in which we're doing this. So we came in as an alliance to manage and build this job. The client had already chosen their designer. So this consultant or designer was already chosen by the client separately, and they provided 30% design. We just came in with a technical proposal, which is of how do we plan to build this commercial proposal, which essentially provided a markup for only the development phase expenditures, which are not a lot really compared to the overall project. Then you win the job, you come in, then you all work together. The designer continues to design the job. We look at it from a constructability point of view. We have all the reviews with the client, with all the stakeholders, because this is a transit sector job, in which means that you have to get a lot of approvals from a lot of parties involved. That process is taking its place. The estimate, the EAC is shaping up. You get it to a class 2. You have reviewed it. You know the risk. You have an updated risk profile based on information that you have, and that then starts to become the baseline. So you really draw the baseline in the sand after, say, 6 months or 9 months from the beginning of the job.
Perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying, Hajir. Talking about, sorry, let me just have this slide gone. And how about the difference between collaborative contracting model and the traditional contracting model that we all know? What are some of the key differences based on your experience, Hajir?
Yeah, this excellent question. As we were just discussing in the beginning, there's a couple of elements which distinguish, what a collaborative contracting model would try to achieve as opposed to a normal contracting model. First off, because this is a collaborative model, it would address one of the challenges that you would have, which is essentially alignment and communication. There's these things called KRA, key result areas, which are being determined collaborative together. So the contractor would propose them, the client would review them and agree to them, and these KRAs would ensure that everything that you're going to be getting in terms of achieving has an incentive in it, so you're all aligned. I'll give you a good example. You're building a project in a community, and you want to make sure that the community's concerns are being addressed. You have to talk to people locally. You'll have to make sure that they're involved in some of the decision makings that they need to be involved in. You need to make sure that you have some kind of a complaint mechanism where you would be listening if there's some noise, let's say, there, and you have to go and adjust your working method to ensure that the noise is not bothering the locals. So there is a KRA which is going to say, okay, whenever there is a noise, there's a concern that would come in from the community. Is it being dealt with in a reasonable amount of time? If there is input that has to be received from First Nations where you're building a project, is it going to be done in a proper model? Are you going to and get the input that you want to get? So all of these, if you want, non-tangible, non-financial issues that have to be done in a project, they would start to have some kind of actually a financial, aspect to them, which would then make everybody better aligned, because the contractor has an incentive now to go and do those things properly to be able to maximize their profit. That's one important aspect, and the other important aspect is that, especially for projects where you are building something with a lot of stakeholders, and the process of approval and commenting is very complicated. This is very good of a model. Why? Because we are looking at the delays and items which may or may not be under the client's is a control, all collaborative. So I'm not going to start to say, you know what, I have this engineering a function of the city which is delaying and reviewing my documents, and you are my client and telling me go and do this job, but I'm being delayed externally. So this is now being discussed in real time, and they're going to try to find a solution for it, as opposed to a contractor getting delayed and going around, turning around and start to push a contract and going through that process. So it eliminates a lot of those contractual problems that can happen, and tries to find a real-time solution for them. So these are two of the main advantages that you would be getting from the collaborative contracts.
Fantastic. So, how about some of you perhaps addressed that, but how does collaborative contracting overcome some of the current challenges that we're facing in the projects? Because we said it just saved us a lot. So, but what kind of challenges it can really save by going through collaborative contracting as compared to the traditional ones?
Yeah. So if you are an owner, there's a bunch of stuff that would be a top of your mind in these days. In these days, right? Especially in the context of Canada, where I'm based, many of the contractors, they're at capacity. It isn't like the old days where you would have a contract, you would have a project coming up, and then you will have five bidders on it. No, you will be getting 2 or 3 bidders, because everybody's busy, and people do not want to take, and contractors don't necessarily want to take risks which are uncontrollable risks. So what has actually happened is, as the traditional models, for example, a traditional design with DBB, a client would come out for a project that is worth $1 billion, and they would put out an RFQ for a DBB, and then they will see that, what, they're only getting 2, and one of them would drop out, or just put in the RFQ with qualifications. So then they turned it into progressive design build, and all of a sudden you have a lot more people interested. Why? Because the risk profile is much better managed, because the transparency in terms of making the decisions is a lot there. So first off, there is better response to the owners who want to build these projects, and now we're not getting essentially good responses with the traditional risk model. Second one, because it's transparent, because everything is open book, so there's a very good chance to actually explain exactly what happened. If a project is being delayed or overrun, I'm not going to get a claim, and then I'm going to have a hard time explaining to my citizens or to my owner or shareholders of what's happening. On real time, you're seeing exactly what's happening. So the transparency is there. Risk profile is being there. There is more attractive for the practitioners, because for the contractors and designers and all the other people that are involved. And as I mentioned, you also have a better non-financial benefit, getting to the community where these projects are being built. So that's also a plus for an owner, because now you have citizens who are going to be better heard. You have First Nations who are going to feel like they're going to be listened to better. You're going to have any stakeholder that may be in that process for any given project, they will be taken into account, and they would become a party that would affect the outcome of the profit of the contractor. So they have an incentive to listen to them. So there's a lot of benefits, really, if you are an owner that is dealing with that. Of course, one important thing is that everybody, to be able to do that, and I'm saying everybody, not just the contractor or an owner, we have to get out of our old shells. We have to stop thinking like a owner and tell the contractors with a site directive, this is what you have to do, or with a contract directive. And a contractor, same thing. You hide information, or you're preparing something that would allow you to go and claim it later on. Or the designer that would just think about a design and not think about other aspects of a project. So everybody has to have a different mindset in order to be able to make this project work. If you go into this model and think traditionally the old way, this is not going to work. You will just end up having all kinds of issues, and that's why there's that coach is there. But the best, if you look at the contract, these contracts are happening elsewhere in the world for about 20 years now. In Australia, it started in UK. There is a learning curve there, so everybody has to start to get used to working differently and acting differently for this model to work.
Okay, great, Hagire. We have some questions before I move on to the tactics and how collaborative contracting actually works. If you don't mind, I would like to ask some questions in regards to the difference between collaborative contracting and some traditional contracting models that we know. So let me see. The question is by Ricardo here, and he's asking IPD, can it also be faced or considered as collaborative contracting model or methodology as well?
Absolutely. Integrated project delivery is, if you want, this is all in the same umbrella of collaborative contracts. Typically, the IPDs are being used for smaller jobs which are like, say, you want to go build a school, you want to go build a community center, by a city or by a town. If the IPD is essentially based on a similar process, but a simpler org, in the sense that you would have an architect, which would essentially design something for you, and then you would have a builder that has to build, and then you have the client. So you really have these three simple partners, and all it IPD does is they combine them together, and they would exactly the same process that I was just explaining, but on a smaller basis, and typically driven by architects. So if you look at the architect firms that are part of the IPD organization, IPDA organization, a lot of them are there. Why? Because this is good. It allows them to essentially do this coordination work that I was just explaining for smaller jobs for the project. Where you're talking about larger jobs, like the ones that I was just explaining to you, if it's a transit job worth $1 billion or $2 billion in a city, it's typically a general contractor like AtkinsRéalis, like Jacobs, like Bechtel, like other firms like that would be doing this same role, but just in a larger scope, simply because the complexity of the projects are higher. So IPD is the same thing, just in a small to mid-size projects.
Perfect. Thanks for clarifying, Hedger. We have another question again on different contract types and perhaps the difference. So the question by Matthew, it's not really complete, but he's bringing like different design build, CM at risk, and different type of contracting. Can you shed more light on the difference between those contracting models and collaborative contracting?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen for one more second.
Here you go.
Yes, so here's a little chart. It's not a comprehensive one, but it just gives you an idea of what will be the difference between them. You can see at the top, you've got the design bid build, right? You've got the progressive design build at the bottom. You've got the construction management at risk. You have a construction management at risk, but with a capped risk. You have the guaranteed maximum price. Then you have the alliance and IPD, and you've got the P3, the famous P3, and the progressive P3. So in each case, really, the difference is not a big difference. If I start from the left and talk about this, so you would go with a design bid build, typical job. You just go in with a price which is firm, right? Then you design it, or the owner typically goes in and give the design work to somebody, and then once the design is done, then you would essentially open up for bid, and then you would start to come back and build it. Or you would go in as a company that would win the job, they would design it, and then they would just build it and keep going. In the progressive design build, what you would do is that you would have these two gates that I was explaining a couple of minutes ago. And what you do is that you renegotiate. You essentially set a baseline with the client, agree with the client as a function of what is going to be happening. Let's say you have developed a class 2 estimate. Once you start, you took over a feed, and then you did the work and you achieved the class 2 estimate, 65%, 70% progress, design progress. You agree on a baseline, and then off you go, and then you just have to deliver to that, and those become the basis for delivering the project. And of course, the most important difference is that, as I was mentioning, you win these jobs, collaborative contracts, not based on money, based on your team, based on your ability to work collaboratively, right? And based on a high level idea of how well you understand the project, not necessarily the numbers that will go in and fix and say, this is my number, and that becomes an important factor in terms of the decision making by the owner. Hope this helps.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much. It was really great. Thank you. And the visual was really good. So, again, talking about this, we have a comment here by Andrea. So in Germany, perhaps they have another thing called AGB contract management. So he's thinking it might be similar. So any idea on that?
Absolutely. This thing is called the collaborative type contract has been called many different things in many different parts of the world. The concept is at the end of the day is it has to be a similar concept. You essentially you go in as a team and you all want to work as a team, and you have to make sure that that piece is being handled. And also the risk here, which is another factor. I mean, if we were continuing with my explanation of those different types of contracts, we would have seen that the risk profile management is also being capped, so you are not exposing a contractor or that environment to go and essentially lose money, a lot of money, even if the project, does not function properly as it deviates from the baseline. So the risk is capped. Why the risk is capped? Because the decisions are being made together, collaborative between the owner and the contractor and the designer and everyone else is involved. And that's why the risk is capped. But of course, it is being called different things in different parts of the world. Absolutely.
Okay, great. So we have another great question here by Benson. And so, can collaborative contracting be applied in any size project? You mentioned like it's really good for big complex project, but can it be adopted to projects regardless of their size and nature? So, what are your thoughts on the type and complexity of the projects for that?
I think the answer to the question is yes, if you want to provide a short answer. But the long answer is that it depends, in a sense that but we were discussing about the elements which is out there in any given sector, any given market. Look at today's situation. You've got an inflation which is problematic. You've got supply chain issues which are still out there. You've got these disturbances in terms of the availability of the labor, of the trades, of availability of the contractors to do the job. So when you look at all these uncertainties, if I am a contractor and I want to build something, I'm going to take into account all of that, and that becomes a high risk profile for me to either take a lot of profits to cover myself in terms of the risk, and also on the other end from the client, which is going to end up paying a lot more. If you have these types of uncertainties in any given point in time due to different factors, then a collaborative model, which would open everything up, it make it transparent, decisions being made together, is certainly brings you value because it enables you to control that process. If, however, you are in a process where everything is known, people have built this, type of unit. I've built 5 substations already. I've already 5 contractors that have already done that for me many times. There's nothing new. I'm going to go a 6th one. Do I need to do a collaborative contracting? No. I would probably be okay with a lump sum because the people that have been designing and building this already are very much used to it. So it's a question of really the elements that exist out there around any given project for any given region, but for any given owner.
Very good. Thank you, Hagire. So I'm now curious to know really how it works. Can you walk us through the process? Also, you mentioned, Hagire, that it's all in real time. In real time, in a collaborative environment, we solve issues. So how does it work? Like now having the concept of the traditional way of doing things. Now, let's say we are getting into collaborative contracting. Can you walk us through the process and how it works? You showed us a very good visual of different teams that are involved, but how does it actually work if someone wants to adopt collaborative contracting in their projects? What they need to know and what they need to do?
Yeah. So if you are an owner, the first and foremost is that there's now a lot of precedence everywhere. Even in North America, we have started to implement, the alliance type contractings, progressive design build type contract for the past couple of years. IPD has been around for more than that. Like people are doing IPD projects for about 10, 15 years. But again, like I mentioned, those are typically smaller jobs with fewer stakeholders in there. So first and foremost, if you are an owner and you want to start to go in that direction, it's a question of bringing in somebody, a company, a partner, consultant, whomever, that is able to take you through the journey in terms of what needs to happen. If I give you a good example, here up in Quebec, where I'm based out, the infrastructure bank here is actually putting out a roadmap exactly for that. So we don't have progressive collaborative contracting models yet implemented here institutionally by the province. But what they're doing is that they have actually done their studies, they've been working on it, and now they have a plan to implement 2-3 projects in the next 2 years. They've put out a guideline. They've looked at all the practices that is happening in the world and finding the best formula that works for them. So this is from the upstream. Now, if you have done all of that and you have developed your contract models and you're ready to go, then typically what happens is that you would go through the process, a similar process of RFQs and RFPs, and then you're looking for people who have some of this experience. And many of the companies functioning in Australia, in UK, elsewhere, they would have some of these contracts, even the contracts that are happening in terms of EPCM, traditional EPCM, oil and gas. Those contracts are also not that far from collaborative contracts, and you would just look for the people who have the expertise. Make sure you go through the process of bidding, as I was explaining, and then you eventually get to the winning team that would start the project. The project typically starts with some kind of a design, either whether it's preliminary, super preliminary, you're at, I don't know, at pre-feed, or no, you may be at feed, at 30% design, and then you would do a little bit of design, you would do some value engineering, you would look at the schedule constructability, you look at all the elements, you go through the certification process. And once all of that is done, typically about 6 months to a year and a half into the award of the contract, then you would have set, the basis for performance. And then after that, you would essentially do the delivery of the job. Now, as I was mentioning, you would typically come in and put in some kind of a baseline. The costs are known, contingencies decided, contingency and risk are decided as a function of the risk. A profit is there, and then KRAs are being determined for additional risk. Of course, like any other project, you can still go overrun, have delays, which may or may not be explainable. So depending on the outcome, of course, you may end up, with that contract is still going overrun and having a delay. But then there is a limited risk here. So the idea is that, yes, you have done a better work upstream, but when you get to downstream, right? So the client is taking, the risk of overruns. The partners would lose their profit, but they wouldn't necessarily, they would recoup their costs. But the partner is going to stay to be responsible for any additional costs. So the risk profile of the client goes up at the end of the job. However, this is an informed decision. This is not like an uninformed decision, because you would have really have done your homework upstream, and then that what you're getting, the level of design definition that is out there, and all the risks that have been identified and have been accounted for, allows you to make a better decision as a client and be able to manage it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Hagire. So my question is, with that collaborative approach, then can you really detect the project issues? For example, when we have a delay happening in a project, we raise that to the client in a typical environment, and then it might go and escalate as a claim, and then all of the other processes. But in such collaborative environment, when an issue happens in a project, when some problems happen, then how does it work? How does it get solved? Do you really
So I'll
yeah.
I'll give you an example. I think perhaps an example is going to be helpful. So I can talk to you about 2 projects. I'm not going to name names, but I can talk to you about 2 projects which are similar, happening in the same region with the same client. One of which is done under the PPP regime, and the other one is is done under the alliance regime. Right. So when you have a PPP regime, this first project was won essentially based on 0% design, like 5% design. There was absolutely no design. So the team won that with a number. They made an estimate of the job. They came in with a schedule and a cost, and they started doing the design to go through the next steps. The first problem that happened was that the review process. This is a project in a city, so you've had all of these independent entities in that city that have to review and approve those drawings. The fire department, the city's engineering arm, the operators, like all of different people have to review and comment on these drawings for them to be approved and be moved on to construction. So you would sometimes end up having actually contradictory commenting from these different stakeholders, and here's the client who just wants to build this project and does have no control over them. What happened to the PPP firm? Of course, there were delays, there were overruns. What happened to the contractor? The contractors went and said, you know what, this is a claim because you're owing money. $1 billion claim went in, $300 million came out, 12-month extension came out. The process was obviously super lengthy, super expensive for everyone. It distracts from really the delivery because a lot of time now you start to talk about, oh, what am I going to put in here? What am I not going to put in here? How am I going to manage this as a client and as a contractor? When you look at the alliance model, same thing happened. The design continued. The review process was still problematic because of the delays of these stakeholders that I had mentioned before in terms of reviewing. What happens here? Nothing. The client is part of the review process. They're the AMT and the ASL teams that I was just showing. They're looking at these delays and they're trying to work out with as a client, because the client is also the city, another arm of the city. So now you're getting the client involved to try and solve those issues and get those folks to expedite their commenting cycles so that we can get those approvals. And some of it is possible, some of it is not possible. So at the end of the day, what we had set out as a plan is just not achievable. Why? Because those entities which we have no control over are taking longer. So that delay has happened, but without a claim and counterclaim environment happening. And some of it was mitigated. Why? Because the client was being involved, all in a positive manner, to be able to influence, some of those cycles. So that's exactly the difference that you're supposed to get from these different types of delivery models and how you can influence that.
That's really amazing to me, Ajay. If we can all move to collaborative contracting, I think most of the project issues will be resolved, isn't it?
I mean, again, in these types of projects, especially for transit jobs where you have a lot of stakeholders, I think that really fits the bill well, because you have a lot of non-controlled parties which would affect the
Yes.
outcome of the parties, and that's perhaps the best place. Having said that, as I mentioned, it is very, very difficult if you are an owner and work there as an owner, sitting on that chair and telling people how to do and not to do for
Yeah.
25 years. Now you have to sit in front of a table, listen to that, make a decision as a team, take the responsibility for the decision that you have just made. It's not like it's contractor's fault. No, it's not contractor's fault. Now we have made a decision as a team. So there's a big paradigm shift that has to happen and is happening, and is very difficult. However, there's a lot of resources out there. There's our coaches. There's a process for that for people who are ready to embark on that journey.
And it should initiate from the owner, right? The whole process.
Yes, I mean, well, it should initiate. I mean, I can tell you that in AtkinsRéalis, we have been championing these types of approaches to a lot of our clients. You know, and not because of our own benefit, because we believe that the sector can benefit better. If you have less players ready to bid on these risky jobs, if you have the clients at the end of the day paying higher for something that they could have paid cheaper, if you could have these claim and counterclaims, it's just making all the consultants richer, and you can find a way to lessen those, not remove them altogether, but lessen those. This is good for the public. This is good for taxpayers' money. This is good for all the players involved. So this is, yes, I think the answer is that the clients have to start it, of course, but there's a lobbying process, in the sense that in ACE we do that. In ACE we actually we encourage people to do that. Like in ACE, I preside over the AC Montreal here in Montreal, Quebec, and we have so far had 3 sessions on collaborative contracts, because again, we believe this is good for the sector. Everybody's going to benefit from that. The clients are going to benefit from that. Contractors are going to benefit from that, and the citizens are going to benefit from that, because as I mentioned to you, all the stakeholders now would have a real, there's going to be money attached to what you would have to do in terms of listening or not listening to that community, in which that project is going to get built.
Exactly. I'm also curious to know how it went for North America. But before that, we have some questions based on our recent discussion, Hagire. So the question, let me find that, was. Okay, so here is the question by Matthew. So the question is, what are the logistics for multi-stakeholder decisions? So how does it work when you have multi-stakeholders? So you said you have coaches and everyone, but like, how does the process work when you have multi-stakeholders, multi-contractors involved?
Yeah, there are very good frameworks, established frameworks which exist out there, right? We looked at that slide together a couple of minutes ago, and you could see that essentially what needs to happen is that we would need to put in this framework in place. So how does that work? The teams have to be involved, formed in terms of the sponsors team, right? Exco teams, executive committees of the projects, with the involvement of the client, like the ALT that you can see here. And this is a typical project team, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But there's also, like, for example, the alliance, the famous alliance coach. That alliance advisor, alliance coach, that is something that also has to exist. So, like, now in the first contracts that we were going after in Canada, we all had to bring in these coaches from UK because they have a lot of experience. After a couple of years, now we have locals who are local companies that are able to actually coach, everyone, all the players in terms of being able to go and adopt these. And I know that management consultants now can help these owners, set up this framework to be able to function. So there is a lot of help available in terms of how we can set this up, this all these elements to work together. But again, I come back to the point, at the center of all of this, it's people. It's really, we have to accept the fact that we have to just function differently, right? As clients, as owners, as clients, and also as contractors.
That's right. Exactly. Well said, Hagire. So, sorry, I'm just keep mixing up with the slide. Give me a second. Yeah, so the question is now, I would like to you walk us a little bit through your journey in North America and in the projects you've been involved in. So, as you've said in the introduction, collaborative contracting is somehow a new concept in North America, and you're really adopting it. So, can you walk us through that journey and the learning curve and how it went so far? And how about in the United States? Have you seen that also being applied or overall in North America, or is it just starting to adopt? I know you told us that it's around 20 years that it has been
Yeah,
in some part of the UK and Australia, and it's very
yeah,
new in this part of the world. So
yeah.
why we are such a late adopters with those benefits that we are hearing from you, and what has been the learning curve from applying it in your projects based on your experience?
Yeah, lots of good points, lots of good questions in your statement. So if you start with a little bit of a background information, as I mentioned, in the 90s, in the late 90s, where when they were developing the oil fields up in North Sea, close to UK, that's where this concept came about. So they came about with this concept of collaborative contracting exactly because of what I was mentioning. Because if the risk factors is just too high, too difficult to deal with, it is just too much of a risk to take on by any individual party. And that model helped have better success, generate better success in terms of the exploration of the offshore oil fields. Australia and UK have both adopted this model, and now you have a large community of practice in terms of the owners and practitioners, right, that are working in these contracts in the UK, um, for at least 10 years, and in Australia the same thing, for more than 15 years. So we in our company, we actually, when the first job that we started this journey with, we brought in people from our Australian, counterparts and Australian divisions who had experience with this and had gone through this, and eventually now this has started to take shape. So I can tell you that, here in up here in Canada, you've got now Metrolinx, which is one of the largest owners of infrastructure of clients of infrastructure work. They have been now doing collaborative contracting for a long time. Over at in the West Coast, you have a lot of institutions that are acting this way. In the East Coast, as I mentioned, the Quebec government is actually starting to do that. I know that the progressive design bill is also being given out in some jurisdictions in US, especially in the West Coast. I haven't seen a lot of it. And I'm not perhaps the best person to talk about every corner in US. A lot of the folks which are there would know more than me in terms of what types of contracts are out there being given. But the journey in the past, I can tell you that we up in Canada, we are perhaps a little bit ahead because we have adopted this model, for in like the past 2-3 years, and it's getting better and better because everybody's getting used to it. The clients are getting used to it. We're getting better at at managing it and going through the process. And of course, and they say that there's a learning curve of at least 5 years for us to be able to go through that. So we have to wait, I guess, a couple of more years for all the players to start to get used to that. And once we will get there, I think then perhaps we will be getting closer to what was there in Australia and UK. Why didn't we adopt it earlier? I don't know. It's a good question, but it's never too late. I think especially the situation, the market situation at these in this day and time, calls for it such a delivery model because it helps the practitioners being more successful.
Exactly. Well said. Thank you. How about some challenges that you went through in adoption of collaborative contracting?
Yeah, the first adoption, of course, was so one thing happens. A funny story is that so when we were going through these bidding processes, right, as I mentioned, you have to do these interviews, collaborative behavioral assessments, CBAs, they're called collaborative behavioral assessments. So you sit in a room and you're getting essentially challenged, by the client or the consultant for the client that, okay, this is a case thrown at you, you're being put under a stress, and then you want to see whether or not you would act like a typical contractor, make a decision, bang on the table, and then just move on and make a decision, or no, you stay calm and try to find a collaborative solution to a problem, to an urgent problem. There are coaches for that. So we have been getting coached all to learn, and to become better at that, and this is now becoming a common practice. But of course, in the beginning, it's like anything else that you would know. So you would learn it, you will practice it, but then when you're put it under a lot of stress, some of us would go back to our old ways of doing that. So one challenge is to see how flexible we are, right, and how ready we are to adopt changes. And this is an individual by individual, a question to be answered by individuals, right? So some people are just able to make some changes to the way they're reacting. Some people are not able to make those changes. And that's one of really the challenges that we would have in terms of being able to bring in folks into these types of delivery models if they are ready to, make that leap and work. That's number one. And number two is, the same thing in terms of the mindset of, we have to have a mindset change of, even if the person is right, but the process has to be adjusted so that everything's going to be auditable. Everything's going to be made as a decision that is now an open book. And again, we are not used to that, not in the client side, not on our side. The third type of challenge is that even if the process is open, right, are we actually going to be thinking about the other stakeholders? Because you may be just going in as a designer and you had a job to do and then off you go. The collaborative contracts means that from day one, when you're designing, you would have to listen to what the client tells you and the contractor tells you and the stakeholder outside of the project tells you in order to adjust your design as you go and make the best outcome. So these are really important challenges that would exist in the way that we function as a collaborative team. And of course, it's a learning curve for a lot of us. Some are better at this, some not necessarily. And that's something that we have to go through as we go through these types of contracts.
And how change management works in that situation, if everyone like bringing change or bringing like in a collaborative environment, like do you still go through formal change management process, Hagire?
You certainly have to go through the change management process, and I can see there was a lot of there were some questions regarding the legal disputes. So that's never going to disappear. There's always going to be a party like this, that fairness advisor that was there, and other mechanisms are always going to stay there in order to deal with disputes. Yes, disputes will all still happen. However, what you're trying to do is that you're trying to manage it as much as possible preemptively, right? And there is no one answer, it would have to do with the regulation that you have in place for every province and every state and every country. The idea is simple, that you will try to talk about all of the problems, before you get the baselines in, and you would try to assign the risk to the person that is able to take the risk. But of course, when the issues, if you are not able to agree on whether or not I have achieved the KRA or not, this of course becomes a dispute that can go down the route of, okay, litigation or whatever else that needs to go. But that's not a point. The point is you put a lot of emphasis at the upstream to try to minimize those types of outcomes. And again, it comes back a little bit to that mindset that I was talking to you about. If I'm a contractor and I want to make this work with an owner, I have every interest to try to make this work. And I know I'm going to have a second job and third job, so I do not certainly want to go into that dispute route, unless it's something that is super important and I really, affecting, both the outcome in a significant way. But I can tell you that it typically not the case. Yes, you will of course have some disputes and you have the change management process in place. It's just that you have set the baseline together with a lot more transparency, and that's very helpful in terms of dealing with what comes next.
And for setting that baseline, is it also a collaborative effort between the contractor and owner? Because usually the contractor comes with a baseline, then we send it for approval for the owner and all that process. So in doing that, and sometimes that baseline is not just the main contractor, you might have several subcontractors and different stakeholders. So and usually the owner consolidate everything and come up with a master plan. So how does it work? Like even you said the baseline is very important. So how we come with that master baseline? Is it still also collaborative or the owner coordinates that? How does it work exactly, Hagire?
The contractor typically coordinates that. So the project team, the project team is mostly comprised of the contractor. Again, there's reps from owner and from designer in there, but the contractor team essentially is the owner of the process or caretaker of the process, but with a lot of input from the owner. So you're sitting in this review together. I've got my estimate. We'll go through that, my class 2 estimate, and we're looking at that discipline by discipline. We're sitting with the client reps and others, and we're reviewing that together. And if you've got a feedback to tell me, you have a time, you have an opportunity to do that. And of course, then we say at some point, okay, we have dealt with that, we have signed off on it, and it becomes a baseline. Similar process to EPCM if you want, in that sense, except that it all happens under one umbrella. It's a little bit better in terms of time management because I'm not going again through a bidding process. I'm negotiating with the client in terms of that baseline and the terms and conditions. For the risk, what I have seen is that you would do these workshops, right? And once you have done the workshops and you have listed all the risks, and you have assigned, let's say, a P50, as a contingency amount, then that becomes a baseline. So now you cannot come back and say, oh, here is the risk that has happened. The first question is, okay, this was part of the original list because it was a comprehensive exercise that was done. If the answer is yes, then there is no new allocation to that. If it's a new risk that was not thought about, in the beginning, then yes, it could become a change management item that you can get a scope change for, and maybe you move your KRA. But again, if the process works fine, and we all, all of us, we have the knowledge of doing that work just with better clarity, then typically it captures a lot of those risks and items and changes that you would get. And then you will still have some change management process to do at the end, of course, but it becomes just, easier to manage and less, less problematic.
And one of the issues in projects, Hedger, is like, yeah, taking time to get approval, taking time to proceed with a change, or so. And usually the owner doesn't have time, or like how these coordinations happens. You said many times in real time, in real time. So how in real time you're solving the issues? Like, are everyone going together in a meeting, or how these things
Yeah,
moving forward?
the review sessions are typically involving clients, right? And the clients have vis-a-vis, which would be partaken in those sessions. If it is a contract in which you have really the entity reviewing the drawings and approving, a deliverable is sitting within that same owner company, that's easier because you're essentially dealing with one organization that is going to approve your design and moving on to the next stage. That is actually less problematic, and already, like, a good example is perhaps incomplete, but good example is oil and gas sector. So the client has the sophistication typically in terms of reviewing what you have done, commenting it, approving it, and then move on to the next. If it is like the infrastructure projects I was talking to you, which is institutional, clients, then you've got a lot of people sitting outside of the client which have to review, but the client doesn't have any say over how those guys are going to take, how much those guys are going to take time, to review those drawings. And that's where these types of contracts is better, because we know that there's going to be some claim. I can't quantify that. I can base myself based on past experience. But if that, for whatever reason, that delay happens, then we will just try to work it out. And if it doesn't get worked out, at least we're not going to claim against each other, because now we know that, okay, this is the process that has taken time. So you don't come back and tell the contractor that was your fault, that that your drawing doesn't get approved. So it's just that being in that meeting together, making the decisions together, looking at the delays together, that allows us to have shared responsibility in terms of what is happening in the project on a real-time basis.
And how the contractor get compensated for those delays, for those changes? And yes, it's collaborative environment, but we usually raise a change order to get compensated, right? So how the compensation works for the contractor in such environment?
Yeah, so you would, because you have different phases, right? So you will always have a running cost, of course, with a team that you have there that has to support a project. But you have different phases in this. In the example that I gave you, you've got a team, you've got original, you've got a initial team that is going through the initial design, that's going through the class 3 to class 2 estimate, a design and an estimate, and that process is where these delays are happening. So that it was supposed to be $60 million contract, that initial works. Guess what? Now it's become a $70 million contract. It's just a change order that is being approved. Why? Because everybody's thinking, I've got a new schedule, right? And the schedule is being looked at on a monthly basis, is being accepted. So if that's the schedule and those are my costs are, don't forget that everything is auditable, it's open book. So if my costs have gone up because I had to stay there for 3 months longer because I'm dealing with that, it's just going to get paid. But again, these are the first phases. Typically, these are all happening pre that baseline. At least that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to capture most of these delays there, so that by the time you get to the execution, you have less of those unknown elements, affecting the outcome of the job. And if those elements still affect the outcome of the job, then that's the conversation about the change management and the KRA is going to come into play, because you say, this was my target to finish by this date, but guess what? I'm delayed further 2 months because of the operator that is delaying me. So we have to now agree in the change management process to delay that KRA, by 2 months, and not losing profit because of something that I cannot control.
And in terms of project controls, how more important project control is having solid foundation in place, I assume, to be able to, like, when we look at the schedule, it's transparent. We should know that there's no error in it, right? I assume. So I assume that with collaborative contracting, we need to have more solid plans and solid processes in place. Is that right, Hagire?
It's true, and they're like a lot of projects that I have seen, they would function with 2, sometimes 3 types of schedules. Right? You've got an internal one, you've got an official one with a client. Like, there's none of that. You have one schedule and one schedule only, and all working together. So yes, of course, there's a lot more transparency involved. That means you have to have a higher quality. That means you have to communicate very well. The most important thing is that you have to have a much better communication regime between all the parties, to say that whether you're a client or a contractor or designer, that here's, I'm going to get delayed, or I'm getting asked this, can we talk about this and make a decision together and move forward, so that you would remove and mitigate some issues that have been happening. And of course, that's where project control kicks in, because project control's job is to give you all the indicators as early as possible to tell you this is what's going to happen. That's the delay that's expected to happen. That's the overrun that's expected to happen. That those documentations being delayed for whatever reason. That's the risk that may happen, and allow everybody then to discuss that and try to mitigate that, and or be notified about that, or at least be aware of it, so that you would not have those issues later on.
And in the review meetings that you said, so it seems that review meetings are really important, that everyone from different stakeholders have attending in those sessions. So does it take up a lot of time from different people? Like, who would be really involved in those meetings to have that collaborative resolution and come up with a solution?
Not necessarily more than a typical review meeting. Like, if you've got a, I don't know, 60% review meeting for a design, you always have your client there, right? You always have, the process that you're going through, and then you review, and then you would approve the set of drawings. It's just that now approval becomes approval of not just the client, but approval of the project team. So we are like working for ourselves, if you want, in a way, so it's one part of the partnership that produces the design. Partnership looks at it, partnership approves it. There is no client versus designer versus contractor. We are all in this. I cannot say as a contractor, oh, this is not buildable, this is not constructible. No, you were there. when we were reviewing that, you were there in that IFC. So if it was not contractable, that's what you have to tell me.
So just everyone looking at it as part of the same group, part of the same company, basically, not owner versus contract. Exactly.
Essentially.
So let's go. Sorry, I didn't notice we are a bit over time. I'm sorry, I just had
Yes.
a lot of questions on this. So um, let me ask the question here. So I'm not sure if you have been involved in, we had some questions on FIDC contracts. So does this collaborative contracting model follows any specific FIDC contract? Hagire, if you're known about that? Did you get the question, Hagire? I think you were frozen for a minute. Sorry, I think. Hello, Hagire, do you hear me? Not sure. It seems that Hagire is frozen. So I think that was the only question left from the session. So not sure. Hagire, if you're hearing me, just let me know so we can continue with that question. But if we are already over time, so I'm going to adjourn the session. If there is any outstanding question, we will see if we can cover that in the comment section of this live broadcast. But thank you everyone for joining us in this session. Special thanks to Hagire for shedding more lights on collaborative contracting and letting us know how it was working. I think Hagire joined us now here.
Yeah.
Hagire, do you hear me now?
Yes, I lost you. I lost you for.
Exactly, I lost you too. I just had one last question, so I'm glad you're back. So, we are having a question about the collaborative contracting model. Does it follow any specific FIDC contract?
Yes, FIDIC has been working on this as of 2021. They actually had gotten interested in the concept as well, and they have developed a model that allows for collaborative contracts. I don't have the exact code on me, but if you search in the FIDIC contracts, you will find a contract model that is essentially can be used for collaborative contracts. Yes.
Fantastic. I think that's the rest of the questions or their comments. So, in regards to the recording, Rosman, yes, this is already recorded. It will be placed on our YouTube channel as well as LinkedIn. So, if you go back, you will see the recording. Go back and check it out. We covered a lot of great topics on collaborative contracting. Special thanks to you, Hagire, for really shedding light on this very important and new topic. At least it was new to me. Yeah, it was really interesting. Thank you so very much, Hagire. So in case people want to learn more or get to connect with you, how they can reach out to you, is there anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm certainly I'm available on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. As I mentioned, we champion collaborative contracting at AtkinsRéalis, where I work. The IPD organization champions that in terms of the delivery models. A lot of jurisdictions and start to talk about this more and more. FIDIC has a collaborative contract, so there's a lot of literature that is being produced as we speak by different organizations, which is conducive for people to learn about collaborative contracts. I would just look it up and you will find a lot of material in there. Happy to be reached for that.
And in AEC, they have not worked on any art.
I haven't seen. It's a good. So I was waiting for you to go there. So I haven't seen anything specific on collaborative contracting, but I can tell you from as I just explained, right?
Yeah.
The stage gauge process. It's as if this collaborative contract is a very perfect match for the stage gauge process, because if you go really through that process and you just communicate and agree and have a consent and then just move on with a team, it would fit very well what we already have in terms of the best practice in AC. On the contractor side, I haven't seen it, but again, I'm not my specialty is project controls. I'm not a contracts person, so I get a caveat for that. It may well be, and I'm not aware of it.
You're an expert in everything, Hagire. So.
No, absolutely not. But yes, but there's a lot of other documentation out there on collaborative contracting. Yes.
Fantastic. So I don't want to take your more from your busy schedule. Very grateful for this discussion we had with you, Hagire. I know how
Pleasure
busy
to be here.
you are as a VP of Project Controls. Come here, sharing your insight with our global audience. I'm really grateful. Thank you so very much, Hagire. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And special thanks to everyone who joined us live from different corners of the globe. I hope you found some value in this session. Especially that was interesting seeing comments from people from Europe section who are really applying some sort of this collaborative contracting. So thank you so much, everyone who joined us and really shed more light into the topic or had questions and engaged in the conversation. Thank you so very much. We will be live again in 2 weeks with another expert on another topic. Until then, enjoy your day and see you later. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.